What was left out of the Bible, and why? For thousands of years, the Bible has stood at the center of Western civilization. Not only as a religious text, but as a foundation upon which laws were written, moral systems were built, and entire cultures were shaped. Kings swore oaths upon it. Empires justified wars through it. Families organized their lives around its words. It is often described as the most influential book ever written. And yet, few people stop to ask a simple question. Is the Bible complete? Most believers assume that what they hold in their hands today is exactly what was always meant to exist. A finished work. A closed collection. A sacred library untouched by human interference. The idea that something could be missing feels uncomfortable, even dangerous. But history rarely supports comfort. Because the Bible did not emerge fully formed. It did not descend from heaven as a single volume. It was assembled over centuries, across continents, through conflict, debate, and power struggles that were anything but spiritual. In its earliest stages, there was no Bible at all. There were stories. There were scrolls. There were oral traditions whispered long before they were written down. Different communities preserved different texts. Some emphasized law. Others prophecy. Others visions, dreams, and revelations. These writings circulated independently, copied by hand, altered by time, and interpreted according to the needs of each generation. Meaning was not fixed. Authority was not centralized. And because literacy was rare, memory and tradition filled the gaps. Stories evolved. Details shifted. Emphasis changed depending on geography, culture, and leadership. What one group considered sacred, another rejected. What one community preserved, another discarded. So the question is not whether texts existed beyond the Bible we know. The real question is, who decided which one survived? At some point, selection became inevitable. As religious movements grew, unity became essential. Not just spiritual unity, but social and political unity. A fragmented belief system cannot govern populations. It cannot support institutions. And it cannot sustain power. Defining sacred scripture became a matter of survival. By deciding which texts carried divine authority, leaders also decided which ideas were allowed to shape reality. Which interpretations were acceptable. Which voices would be remembered, and which would be erased. This process would later be called canonization. And it was never neutral. Both Judaism and Christianity faced this struggle. Jewish leaders, particularly after periods of exile and foreign domination, sought to preserve identity through scripture. Texts written in Hebrew, tied to prophetic lineage, and aligned with strict monotheism were prioritized. Others were quietly set aside. Christianity inherited this challenge, and magnified it. Early Christian communities were scattered across the Roman world. They did not all believe the same things. Some emphasized Jesus as divine. Others emphasized his humanity. Some focused on obedience. Others on transformation. Some taught salvation through faith alone. Others through knowledge. Letters circulated freely. Gospels multiplied rapidly. Teachings contradicted one another. From a spiritual perspective, this diversity reflected exploration. From an institutional perspective, it was chaos. And chaos is dangerous to authority. Once Christianity gained imperial favor in the 4th century, disagreement was no longer merely theological. It became political. A unified empire required a unified faith. Belief had to be standardized. Doctrine had to be controlled. At that moment, defining orthodoxy became urgent. Not only deciding what was true, but identifying what was threatening. Texts that raised too many questions. Texts that challenged fear-based obedience. Texts that offered explanations instead of mystery. These were not just inconvenient. They were dangerous. And so, decisions were made. Some writings were preserved, copied, and declared sacred. Others were labeled heretical, forbidden, or simply allowed to disappear. Over time, their absence became invisible. Generations passed without knowing they had ever existed. What survived was powerful. But it was also selective. The Bible that exists today is not false. But it is not the whole story. Behind its pages lie debates we never witnessed. Conflicts we were never taught. And voices that were deliberately silenced, not because they lacked meaning, but because they carried too much of it. To understand what was removed, we must first understand why removal was necessary. And that begins with the hidden books. Before any book could be declared sacred, something had to happen first. Authority had to be established. The idea of a fixed biblical canon did not emerge from revelation alone. It emerged from necessity. Religious communities, especially those under threat, needed boundaries. They needed clarity. They needed agreement, not just about belief, but about identity. For ancient Judaism, this need became urgent after centuries of instability. Foreign empires had ruled over the land of Israel in succession. Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans. Each conquest threatened not only political autonomy, but cultural survival. Language, customs, and religious practices were constantly at risk of dilution. In this context, sacred texts became anchors. They were not merely spiritual guides. They were instruments of preservation. Through Scripture, a people could remember who they were, and who they were not. But memory requires selection. By the end of the 1st century, Jewish scholars had largely closed what is now known as the Hebrew canon. The criteria were not arbitrary. Texts written in Hebrew or Aramaic were favored. Writings associated with prophetic authority were prioritized. Teachings that reinforced strict monotheism were preserved. Other texts existed, many of them. But they no longer carried equal weight. This process did not erase diversity. It controlled it. Christianity inherited this framework, but under far more volatile conditions. Unlike Judaism, early Christianity had no central authority in its first centuries. It spread rapidly across the Roman Empire through small, scattered communities. These groups often had little contact with one another. Their beliefs developed independently. As a result, early Christianity was astonishingly diverse. Some communities viewed Jesus primarily as a divine being who descended from heaven. Others emphasized his humanity, his teachings, and his example. Some believed his death was a cosmic sacrifice. Others believed salvation came through understanding his message. There were Christians who believed the material world was fundamentally corrupt. Others believed creation itself was sacred. Some emphasized obedience to moral law. Others emphasized inner transformation. And all of them claimed legitimacy. Texts multiplied accordingly. Gospels were written in different regions, reflecting different priorities. Letters circulated from teachers whose authority was recognized in one community and rejected in another. Visions, revelations, and teachings appeared continuously. From a modern perspective, this period appears rich and creative. From the perspective of emerging institutions, it was a crisis. Without standardization, belief fractured. Without hierarchy, authority dissolved. And without authority, no institution could endure. The turning point came when Christianity moved from the margins of society to the center of imperial power. In the 4th century, after Christianity gained official recognition within the Roman Empire, the stakes changed completely. The faith was no longer a persecuted movement. It was becoming the ideological backbone of an empire. And empires do not tolerate ambiguity. A unified doctrine became essential. Leaders could no longer afford competing interpretations of Jesus' identity, mission, or message. Theological disagreement now threatened political stability. At this moment, defining orthodoxy became inseparable from preserving power. Councils were convened. Debates intensified. Bishops argued not only over theology, but over influence. Which communities would shape the future of the faith? Which voices would be amplified, and which would be silenced? Canonization emerged as the solution. To be included in the official collection of sacred texts, a book had to meet specific criteria. It needed to align with accepted doctrine. It needed to support emerging structures of authority. And crucially, it needed influential backing. Texts that fit these conditions were preserved. Those that did not were labeled dangerous. This does not mean that excluded writings were false. Many were widely read, deeply respected, and considered spiritually valuable by early believers. But they presented problems. Some questioned hierarchy. Some diminished the role of clergy. Some suggested that divine knowledge could be accessed without intermediaries. These ideas were destabilizing. Once a list of accepted books began to solidify, exclusion became enforcement. Books were not merely set aside. They were condemned. Their readers were accused of heresy. In some cases, possession of these texts became punishable. The goal was not only to define truth. It was to control access to it. Over time, this process created the illusion of inevitability. Later generations would inherit a Bible that appeared timeless, unified, and uncontested. The conflicts that shaped it faded into obscurity. What remained was a curated collection, powerful, coherent, and authoritative. But behind that authority lay centuries of debate, suppression, and compromise. The Bible, as it exists today, reflects the outcome of those struggles. It represents the voices that prevailed. And just as importantly, it conceals the voices that did not. To understand what was truly at stake in this process, one must examine the texts that frightened authorities the most. Among them, one stands apart. A book so controversial, so unsettling, that even centuries of reverence could not protect it from exclusion. That book is known as the Book of Enoch. Among all the texts excluded from the biblical canon, none has provoked more controversy, fascination, and fear than the Book of Enoch. Its absence from most modern Bibles often gives the impression that it was obscure, marginal, or insignificant. History suggests the opposite. In the ancient world, the Book of Enoch was widely known, deeply influential, and taken seriously by both Jewish and early Christian communities. Fragments of the text were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, confirming its circulation during the Second Temple period. Early Christian writers were familiar with it. One New Testament author even quoted directly from it, treating its words as authoritative. Yet today, the Book of Enoch is largely unknown to the average reader of the Bible. This disappearance was not accidental. The Book of Enoch presents a worldview that is structurally different from that of later institutional theology. It does not portray heaven as distant or passive. It describes a universe layered with hierarchy, conflict, and moral responsibility that extends beyond humanity. In Enoch's account, angels are not symbolic abstractions. They are named beings, organized into ranks, entrusted with specific duties, and capable of disobedience. According to the text, a group of angels known as the Watchers were sent to observe humanity. Their role was to protect, guide, and maintain order. Instead, they intervened. They crossed boundaries that were never meant to be crossed. They took human women as partners. And in doing so, they altered the course of history. The Watchers did not merely transgress sexually. They transmitted forbidden knowledge. They taught humanity skills and practices that accelerated corruption rather than wisdom. Metallurgy that enabled advanced weaponry. Astronomical knowledge used for divination. Practices that blurred the line between insight and manipulation. In Enoch's narrative, humanity is not portrayed as the sole architect of its own downfall. It is portrayed as vulnerable. The offspring of these unions, known as the Nephilim, are described as giant beings, neither fully angelic nor fully human. They embody a violation of cosmic order. Their existence represents imbalance, excess, and domination. As these beings multiplied, violence escalated. Resources were consumed. Humanity suffered. In response, divine judgment is directed not only toward humans, but toward the rebellious angels themselves. This reframing of evil carries profound implications. In later Orthodox theology, sin is primarily human. Disobedience originates within mankind. Punishment, therefore, is directed downward. Fear becomes a mechanism of control. The Book of Enoch disrupts this framework. It suggests that corruption entered the world from outside humanity. That humans became collateral damage in a larger spiritual conflict. That responsibility is shared, not concentrated. This shift weakens fear-based obedience. If humanity is not the sole source of evil, then divine justice cannot be reduced to punishment alone. Protection, mercy, and intervention become central themes. For institutions built on authority, this was dangerous. The Book of Enoch also presents a God who is actively engaged in shielding humanity from forces beyond its control. Judgment exists, but it is directed upward as well as downward. Angels are held accountable. Power is not exempt from consequence. This portrayal destabilizes hierarchical theology. If even celestial beings can rebel, fail, and be punished, then authority itself becomes conditional, not absolute. From an institutional standpoint, such ideas are destabilizing. They invite questions. They encourage moral complexity. They shift focus away from blind obedience and toward understanding. Moreover, the Book of Enoch is explicitly apocalyptic. It describes visions of cosmic judgment, the end of the age, and the arrival of a messianic figure. These themes were not foreign to ancient Judaism, but Enoch's interpretations were unusually detailed and vivid. Its imagery pushed boundaries. Heaven is described as structured but vulnerable. Evil is organized, not chaotic. Judgment is inevitable, but not arbitrary. These visions inspired awe, but also unease. As religious authority became increasingly centralized, ambiguity became a liability. Leaders preferred mystery over explanation. Fear over understanding. The Book of Enoch offered too much clarity. It explained where evil came from. It explained why humanity suffers. It explained that power can fall. For emerging church leadership, this was unacceptable. By the 4th century, as the Christian canon solidified, the Book of Enoch found itself increasingly marginalized. Though respected in earlier periods, it conflicted with doctrines that emphasized original sin as purely human, and authority as divinely protected. Eventually, it was removed from most biblical traditions. Only a few communities, such as the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, preserved it as sacred. Elsewhere, it faded. But its influence did not disappear. Elements of Enoch's cosmology echo throughout later religious thought. References to fallen angels, demonic hierarchies, and cosmic conflict persist, often stripped of their original context. The text itself, however, was deemed too dangerous to remain intact. Because it suggested that obedience alone is not enough. It implied that understanding matters. It hinted that humanity is not merely sinful, but vulnerable. And that vulnerability challenges systems built on fear. The exclusion of the Book of Enoch was not about accuracy. It was about control. Its worldview threatened the simplicity required for mass obedience. It complicated theology. It empowered inquiry. And inquiry has always been the enemy of absolute authority. To understand why this book frightened religious institutions, one must recognize what it offered. Not rebellion, but responsibility. Not chaos, but accountability, even for those in power. And that was something no empire could afford. Centuries after the exclusion of texts like the Book of Enoch, another collection of writings would surface, revealing just how diverse early Christianity truly was. Their discovery did not occur in cathedrals or libraries. It happened by accident. In 1945, near the town of Nag Hammadi in Egypt, a group of texts buried in clay jars was uncovered by local farmers. These manuscripts, written in Coptic and dating back to the early centuries of Christianity, contained Gospels, dialogues, and teachings that had been deliberately erased from history. They are now known collectively as the Nag Hammadi Library. What these texts revealed was unsettling. They did not describe a unified early church. They exposed a fragmented spiritual landscape in which multiple interpretations of Jesus' message coexisted and competed. These writings did not reject Jesus. They redefined him. Central to these texts was a worldview known as Gnosticism. While not a single movement, Gnostic traditions shared a common emphasis. Salvation was not achieved through obedience, ritual, or institutional membership. Salvation came through knowledge. Not intellectual knowledge. Experiential knowledge. Gnosis. In this framework, ignorance, not sin, was humanity's greatest enemy. The divine was not distant or external. It was hidden within the individual, waiting to be awakened. This concept alone posed an existential threat to organized religion. If divine truth resides within the individual, then institutions lose their role as gatekeepers. Authority becomes internal. Mediation becomes unnecessary. Hierarchy collapses. Among all Gnostic writings, none is more destabilizing than the Gospel of Thomas. Unlike the canonical Gospels, Thomas contains no narrative. No birth story. No crucifixion. No resurrection account. It consists entirely of sayings attributed to Jesus. 114 of them. They are brief. Often cryptic. Frequently unsettling. There are no explanations. No moral framing. No institutional interpretation. The responsibility to understand lies entirely with the reader. In several passages, Jesus speaks not of worship, but of discovery. Not of submission, but of awakening. The kingdom of God, he says, is not something that will arrive in the future. It is already present. Hidden. Within and among human beings. Such teachings dissolve the boundary between sacred and ordinary. They remove the need for intermediaries. They suggest that spiritual authority cannot be monopolized. For early church leaders striving to unify belief, this was intolerable. A faith that requires interpretation cannot be easily controlled. A message that demands self-discovery cannot be standardized. The Gospel of Thomas offered no mechanism for enforcement. No hierarchy. No fear-based incentive. It empowered the individual. Other Gnostic texts expanded this challenge even further. Some portrayed the creator of the material world not as the ultimate God, but as a lesser, flawed being, ignorant of the higher divine reality. In these narratives, the true God exists beyond the visible universe, while the material world is a place of distortion and entrapment. This cosmology inverted traditional theology. Instead of viewing the world as fallen due to human sin, it portrayed humanity as trapped within a broken system it did not design. Suffering, in this view, was not punishment. It was a symptom. The solution was not obedience. It was awakening. These ideas undermined core doctrines that were still forming. If suffering is not divinely ordained, then fear loses its theological foundation. If ignorance is the problem, then punishment becomes ineffective. Institutions thrive on clear boundaries: orthodoxy versus heresy, obedience versus rebellion. Gnostic texts blurred those boundaries. They introduced nuance, ambiguity, interpretive freedom. Even more threatening was the way these texts treated authority figures. In several Gnostic writings, traditional disciples misunderstand Jesus. They ask the wrong questions. They cling to literal interpretations. Meanwhile, insight is often granted to unexpected figures, outsiders, skeptics, or women. Authority is not inherited. It is demonstrated. This perspective destabilized apostolic hierarchy. It suggested that lineage does not guarantee understanding. That proximity to power does not equal spiritual depth. For leaders attempting to consolidate control, such implications were dangerous. As Christianity gained imperial support in the 4th century, unity became more than a spiritual aspiration. It became a political necessity. An empire requires consistency. A fragmented theology invites dissent. Texts that encouraged individual interpretation were liabilities. Thus, boundaries were drawn. Councils convened. Orthodoxy was defined not solely by spiritual insight, but by institutional survival. Texts that aligned with centralized authority were preserved. Texts that empowered individuals were condemned. Gnostic writings were labeled heretical. Their possession became dangerous. Their ideas were ridiculed, suppressed, and in many cases destroyed. What survived was not necessarily what was most original. It was what was most manageable. The Nag Hammadi discovery revealed what had been lost. Not a different religion, but a different way of understanding faith. One that prioritized inner transformation over external conformity. One that treated knowledge as liberation rather than threat. By excluding these texts, the Church preserved unity, but sacrificed diversity. It secured authority, but silenced inquiry. The result was a version of Christianity that emphasized belief over understanding, obedience over insight. The Gnostic texts did not disappear because they were false. They disappeared because they were uncontrollable. They asked questions institutions could not answer, and offered freedom institutions could not allow. Among the texts removed from the early Christian tradition, few reveal institutional anxiety as clearly as the Gospel of Mary. Its surviving fragments do not challenge the divinity of Jesus. They challenge something far more threatening: authority. The Gospel of Mary does not depict a community divided by disbelief. It portrays a community divided by leadership. The tension within the text is not theological confusion, but resistance to who is allowed to speak. Mary Magdalene is presented not as a peripheral follower, but as a central figure. She speaks with confidence. She recalls teachings that Jesus shared privately. She offers interpretation, reassurance, and spiritual insight at a moment when the other disciples are fearful and uncertain. This portrayal contradicts the image preserved in later tradition. In canonical texts, Mary's role is limited. She is a witness, a messenger, rarely a teacher. In the Gospel of Mary, she is something else entirely. A spiritual authority. After Jesus' departure, the disciples are described as distressed. They fear persecution. They doubt their ability to continue. It is Mary who addresses them. She encourages them not to lose heart. She reminds them of teachings that emphasize inner transformation rather than external threat. Her authority is not claimed. It is recognized. At least by some. Others react with hostility. Peter openly questions her legitimacy. He challenges whether Jesus would have revealed secret teachings to a woman rather than to the male disciples. His objection is not doctrinal. It is positional. The issue is not whether Mary's words are true. It is whether she is allowed to speak them. This moment exposes a conflict that extends far beyond a single text. It reflects a broader struggle in early Christianity, whether leadership would be based on insight or lineage, understanding or proximity to power. The Gospel of Mary suggests that spiritual authority is earned through comprehension and connection, not through gender or status. Such a concept was destabilizing. If Mary's authority were accepted, apostolic hierarchy would fracture. Leadership would become fluid. Authority would be internal rather than inherited. Institutions cannot survive that. The resistance Mary faces in the text mirrors the resistance faced by alternative interpretations of faith more broadly. Her voice represents a threat not because of its content, but because of what it implies. Equality. The Gospel of Mary aligns closely with themes found in Gnostic literature. Salvation is portrayed as a process of awakening. Sin is reframed as ignorance. Fear is exposed as an obstacle to spiritual growth rather than a tool for discipline. These ideas shift responsibility inward. They reduce reliance on external enforcement. And they weaken hierarchical control. From a historical perspective, it is significant that the Gospel of Mary was not the only text to elevate her role. Other early writings refer to her as a favored disciple. Some depict tension between her and male apostles. These portrayals suggest that her authority was not a later invention. It was remembered and contested. As Christianity became institutionalized, such memories became inconvenient. Leadership roles were increasingly formalized. Authority was centralized. Gender norms solidified. A narrative in which a woman held spiritual authority challenged all three. The solution was erasure. By excluding texts that elevated Mary, the emerging church preserved a structure in which authority flowed in one direction. Male leadership became normative. Spiritual insight was subordinated to institutional role. Mary's influence was not denied. It was minimized. Over time, her image was reshaped. In later tradition, she was often associated with sin and repentance rather than teaching and authority. This reframing did not occur accidentally. It neutralized her legacy. A teacher becomes a penitent. A leader becomes a cautionary figure. The Gospel of Mary reveals what was lost in that transformation. Not a challenge to faith, but a challenge to control. The exclusion of Mary's voice did not strengthen theology. It simplified it. It removed complexity. It eliminated a model of leadership based on insight rather than dominance. By silencing Mary, the Church avoided a precedent that could not be managed. Because if authority is rooted in understanding, then anyone capable of understanding becomes dangerous. The Gospel of Mary does not ask readers to rebel. It asks them to listen. And listening, in hierarchical systems, is often the first act of resistance. Few stories have shaped human self-perception more deeply than the story of Adam and Eve. It is short, symbolic, and profoundly influential. In its canonical form, the narrative establishes a foundational framework. Humanity begins in innocence, disobeys God, and falls into corruption. From this moment onward, suffering, labor, shame, and death become the human condition. This story does more than explain origins. It explains obedience. But in the earliest centuries of Jewish and Christian thought, this interpretation was not universal. Alternative texts, many of which were later excluded or suppressed, present a radically different understanding of the same myth. In these versions, the story is not about sin. It is about awareness. Gnostic writings reinterpret the Garden of Eden as a symbolic space of ignorance rather than perfection. Adam and Eve are not morally flawless beings who fall through rebellion. They are incomplete beings who awaken through knowledge. The act of eating from the tree is not portrayed as corruption. It is portrayed as initiation. In several non-canonical texts, the serpent is not a deceiver aligned with evil. Instead, it functions as a catalyst for awakening. The serpent encourages awareness, self-knowledge, and discernment. This inversion is striking, because it removes fear as the foundation of faith. In these traditions, God is not threatened by human knowledge. The true danger lies in ignorance. The problem is not that humanity knows too much. It is that humanity knows too little. This interpretation fundamentally alters the relationship between humanity and the divine. Rather than a hierarchy based on guilt, it proposes a journey based on growth. Rather than obedience enforced through punishment, it emphasizes understanding cultivated through insight. Such a framework is incompatible with centralized authority. If humanity's core problem is ignorance rather than sin, then salvation becomes a process of learning, not submission. Forgiveness becomes secondary to awakening. Fear loses its power as a tool of control. This helps explain why alternative interpretations of Eden were not preserved. The canonical version of Genesis establishes a moral debt. Humanity is born fallen. Redemption must come from outside. Authority becomes necessary to mediate between God and mankind. The non-canonical versions dissolve that dependency. In texts like the Apocrypha of John, Adam is portrayed not as a criminal but as a luminous being who gradually awakens to his true nature. Eve is not a temptress but a revealer, one who helps Adam perceive the divine spark within himself. This portrayal reverses later theological assumptions. Woman is not the source of downfall. She is the source of insight. Such ideas threatened multiple power structures simultaneously. They challenged gender hierarchy. They questioned inherited guilt. They undermined the necessity of institutional mediation. Most importantly, they reframed God. In these texts, God is not primarily a judge. God is a source. The punitive figure often associated with wrath and punishment is sometimes depicted as a lesser, ignorant power, a ruler obsessed with obedience rather than truth. This figure enforces law without understanding, order without compassion. This distinction was unacceptable to emerging orthodoxy. A God who rules through fear legitimizes authority structures. A God who invites understanding destabilizes them. As Christianity evolved into an organized institution, its theology increasingly emphasized moral regulation. Sin became a constant condition. Confession became a mechanism. Redemption required submission to doctrine, sacrament, and hierarchy. The story of Eden was central to this system. By framing humanity as inherently guilty, the institution positioned itself as indispensable. Without the church, there was no access to grace. Without obedience, there was no salvation. Alternative myths disrupted this logic. They suggested that divine connection was internal. That enlightenment was possible through awareness. That the sacred was not monopolized by authority. These ideas did not disappear quietly. They were labeled heretical. Their texts were destroyed. Their interpretations were ridiculed. Over time, they survived only in fragments, buried in deserts, hidden in jars, preserved by accident rather than permission. The victory of the canonical Eden story was not merely theological. It was strategic. It standardized guilt. It normalized fear. It justified control. By internalizing the idea that humanity is fallen by nature, generations learned to distrust themselves. Moral authority shifted outward. Obedience became virtue. Questioning became danger. And yet, the persistence of alternative Eden myths suggests something important. These ideas did not vanish because they were weak. They vanished because they were powerful. They offered a vision of humanity that did not require perpetual submission. They suggested that growth, not punishment, was the path to transformation. In that vision, the divine is not offended by curiosity. It is revealed through it. Few concepts in religious history have exerted as much psychological influence as the idea of hell. It is vivid. It is terrifying. And, for much of history, it has been extraordinarily effective. Yet one of the most surprising facts about hell is how little it appears in the earliest biblical texts. In the Hebrew Bible, there is no fully developed concept of eternal torment. Instead, references are made to Sheol, a shadowy realm where all the dead go, righteous and wicked alike. Sheol is not a place of punishment. It is a place of absence. There is no fire. No demons. No eternal suffering. The dead simply exist in silence, cut off from life and consciousness. This vision reflects an ancient worldview concerned more with life on earth than with detailed speculation about the afterlife. The idea of hell as a realm of fiery punishment emerges much later. As Jewish thought encountered Persian, Greek, and later Roman influences, concepts of cosmic justice began to evolve. Zoroastrianism introduced the notion of moral judgment after death. Greek philosophy explored the fate of the soul. These ideas gradually merged into Jewish apocalyptic literature. By the time of the Second Temple period, texts like the Book of Daniel introduced the concept of resurrection and judgment. But even here, punishment is limited and symbolic, not eternal. The leap from judgment to everlasting torment had not yet occurred. That transformation took place during the rise of Christianity. In the New Testament, references to punishment appear more frequently, but they are still ambiguous. Jesus speaks of Gehenna, a real valley outside Jerusalem associated with death, refuse, and ritual impurity. Whether these references were meant literally or symbolically remains a matter of scholarly debate. What is clear is that the earliest Christian communities did not share a unified vision of hell. Some believed punishment was temporary. Others believed all souls would eventually be restored. Still others rejected the idea of post-mortem punishment entirely. These views coexisted for centuries. The doctrine of eternal hell was not immediately dominant. Its rise coincided with the consolidation of church authority. As Christianity transitioned from a persecuted movement to a state-supported institution, theology became increasingly structured. Belief systems were no longer just spiritual frameworks, they were tools for social cohesion. And fear is a powerful tool. The concept of eternal punishment served multiple functions. It reinforced moral behavior. It discouraged dissent. And it elevated the church as the sole mediator between salvation and damnation. If hell was eternal, then error was catastrophic. If error was catastrophic, then obedience was essential. This logic reshaped Christian teaching. Over time, abstract references to judgment were transformed into graphic depictions of suffering. Fire, darkness, demons, and endless torment became central features of religious imagination. These images did not come directly from Scripture. They came from interpretation. Church leaders, theologians, and later artists expanded the concept of hell through sermons, writings, and visual art. Medieval Europe, in particular, became saturated with vivid portrayals of damnation. Hell was described in precise detail. Specific sins received specific punishments. Eternal fire consumed bodies that never fully burned. Demons tormented souls without rest or mercy. These images served a clear purpose. They made fear tangible. In largely illiterate societies, images were more effective than texts. Paintings, sculptures, and stained glass windows turned theology into spectacle. Fear was no longer abstract. It was visible. The institutional church benefited from this framework. By defining itself as the authority capable of guiding souls away from hell, it positioned obedience as a survival strategy. Sacraments became safeguards. Confession became necessity. Doctrine became law. Alternative interpretations were dangerous. Texts that suggested universal salvation, temporary punishment, or eternal redemption threatened this structure. If hell was not eternal, fear lost its leverage. If salvation was internal, authority lost its monopoly. Such ideas were suppressed. Writings associated with universal reconciliation were condemned. Teachers who questioned eternal punishment were labeled heretics. Over time, theological diversity narrowed. Fear became standardized. By the Middle Ages, hell was no longer a theoretical concept. It was a certainty. The psychological impact was profound. Individuals learned to monitor their thoughts, desires, and doubts. Guilt became internalized. Self-surveillance replaced external enforcement. Control no longer required constant force. Fear did the work. Yet despite centuries of reinforcement, the doctrine of eternal hell has always faced resistance. Even within mainstream Christianity, theologians have struggled to reconcile eternal punishment with a compassionate and just God. Why would finite actions result in infinite suffering? Why would a loving Creator design a system with no possibility of redemption? These questions never disappeared. They were simply overshadowed. In modern times, as historical scholarship expanded, the origins of hell became clearer. Scholars began tracing its development across cultures and centuries. What emerged was not a single divine revelation, but a layered construction shaped by politics, psychology, and power. Hell evolved. It adapted. And it endured because it worked. Not as a spiritual truth alone, but as a mechanism of control. Understanding this history does not require rejecting faith. It requires recognizing how fear has been used to shape belief. The concept of hell tells us less about the afterlife, and far more about authority in this one. When the Bible was finally closed, something extraordinary happened. Not just inclusion, but silence. What survived became sacred. What was excluded became invisible. And history, written by those with authority, moved forward as if those voices had never spoken. Yet absence leaves traces. Behind every finalized canon exists a shadow canon, a collection of ideas, questions, and interpretations that were once alive, debated, and deeply meaningful. These were not fringe fantasies. They were part of the living fabric of early faith. What was lost was not merely text. It was possibility. In the earliest centuries, belief was fluid. Communities wrestled openly with the nature of God, evil, salvation, and human purpose. Faith was not yet uniform. It was exploratory, dangerous, alive. There was room for contradiction. Some believed divine truth was external, revealed, commanded, enforced. Others believed it was internal, discovered, awakened, remembered. Some saw humanity as fallen and helpless. Others saw humanity as wounded, but capable of restoration. Some believed fear was necessary. Others believed love was sufficient. The canon closed these debates. Not because they were resolved, but because they were inconvenient. As institutions solidified, ambiguity became a liability. Certainty was easier to govern. Uniform belief reduced fragmentation. A single authorized narrative replaced many competing ones. The cost was immense. Entire ways of understanding the divine were erased. The idea that knowledge could liberate rather than condemn. That transformation mattered more than obedience. That divine presence could be experienced without intermediaries. These ideas did not vanish because they were false. They vanished because they shifted power. What remained shaped civilization. Law, morality, art, and identity were built upon the surviving texts. Their influence is undeniable. Their beauty, depth, and wisdom remain profound, but completeness was never the goal. Control was. This does not mean the Bible is a lie. It means it is a selection. And every selection implies exclusion. The silenced texts reveal a version of humanity less afraid, but more responsible. A humanity asked not merely to obey, but to understand. Not merely to fear judgment, but to confront consciousness. These ideas were dangerous. A believer who seeks understanding cannot be easily controlled. A believer who sees the divine within does not require constant supervision. A believer who values knowledge becomes difficult to manipulate. Institutions do not thrive on that kind of freedom. And so the narrative narrowed. Over centuries, layers of doctrine reinforced one central message: salvation flows through authority. Truth is mediated. Questioning is risky. Fear is justified. Yet even under suppression, echoes remain. In art. In mysticism. In forbidden manuscripts hidden in deserts and caves. In whispered traditions passed quietly from teacher to student. History has a way of resurfacing what was buried. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi Library, and other forgotten texts did not rewrite the Bible. But they rewrote our understanding of its formation. They revealed a process, human, political, and deeply contested. They showed that faith was never meant to be simple. Perhaps the greatest loss was not specific books, but trust in the individual's capacity to seek truth. The canon taught believers what to think. The lost texts invited believers to think. This distinction matters. Because faith built on fear seeks compliance. Faith built on understanding seeks transformation. When fear dominates, obedience replaces reflection. Guilt replaces growth. Authority replaces conscience. Yet something persists beneath centuries of doctrine. A question. What if faith was never meant to be passive? What if belief was meant to evolve? What if the divine was not fragile, not threatened by inquiry, doubt, or reinterpretation? What if silence itself was the most powerful tool ever used? The Bible, as it exists today, remains one of humanity's most influential works. Its impact cannot be undone, nor should it be dismissed. But it should be understood, not as a finished revelation descending fully formed from heaven, but as a living document shaped by centuries of struggle, between fear and freedom, authority and insight, control and conscience. The forbidden texts remind us that history is not just written by victors. It is edited by them. And perhaps the greatest secret is not what was removed, but that humanity was taught to stop looking.